Hi, I'm Sarah Meyer-Walsh of Vote Papier, and I'm showing you how to make wedding invitations. And we're finally there. We're ready to put together an actual wedding invitation. We're going to model the one that we're making today on this set here, using browns and golds and copper colors. To get started, there are a few things that you will need, including however many envelopes for mailing the invitation and envelopes for RSVP based on the number of guests that you will be inviting. You'll also need a paper cutter, glue, scissors, a pencil, a ruler or a straight edge, and a couple of fancier papers. Depending on how many invitations you'll be making, you'll need several sheets of two different decorative paper along with a plain brown paper. So to get started, you'll need to print the actual invitation piece on your 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. And like I said, you can get 2 out of each page. And I like to use a design program so that I can print little guidelines so that when I use the paper cutter, it makes it much easier. So to get started, we're going to match up the lines on the paper cutter just to make sure that the printer cut the paper straight also. And then we're going to start trimming the paper away to be the size that we hoped that it would be. So once you've cut the invitation piece, you can set it aside. And I like to cut all of the pieces at a time. So if we were doing 100, I would cut all 50 of these sheets first and stack them up before moving on to the next piece. So the next piece we're going to be cutting is actually the white backing behind this sheet on here. And just to expedite the process a little bit, I've already cut that. So we have it right here. So we'll set those two together. So next we're going to move on to cutting the brown piece, which will be the middle backing on the page. So we want to measure to make sure that it's the right size, and it looks like it's going to need to be 4 3/4 by 7 3/4. So again, we could get two invitation pieces out of one sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. So measure carefully. So we've got 7 3/4 by 4 3/4. And like I said before, if you were doing 100, you'd go ahead and cut all of those, all 100 of them first. So we can put this piece behind these two and just set it aside for a moment, because next we'll cut the one that is going to have the bigger band of the two large sheets of paper. So in this case, it's going to be this coppery striped page. And what you'll want to do is, again, measure how big the piece needs to be. So the piece in this case is going to have to be 5 1/4 by 8 1/4. So you would measure the whole sheet and determine which way to lay them out to get the most pieces out of the one sheet of paper. So in this case, we're just going to cut off a piece big enough for our invitation. So there. And then we'll cut it out. So normally what you would do is you'd cut all the strips for all 100 pieces, and then you would run them through the paper cutter to clean up the edges. Because you always want to use the paper cutter to make sure that your edges are perfectly straight. So now we're just going to trim it to 8 1/4 by 5 1/4. So 5 1/4 and 8 1/4. And then we have that piece, so we'll put that behind. And then finally, we're going to cut the very outside piece, which is going to be 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. So I've already gone and cut off a piece out of the big paper for this. So now we'll just put it on the paper cutter to trim it. So again, it's 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. Great. And now we have all the pieces we need to assemble our invitations. So again, you will have cut all the pieces for 100 invitations, and then you can move all the sheets of extra paper out of the way before you start assembling. So what I like to do is I like to separate all of the pieces before I get started to set them into piles for each invitation set. And then what you can do is start applying the glue. So we will gently and carefully run a skinny little thread of glue around the outside of the invitation piece and glue it onto its white backing. And though these aren't different colors, they do create a nice effect and help to make the invitation piece itself pop out a little bit more. And it adds to the overall weight of the invitation. And usually you want your invitation to be a little bit heavier in weight. Okay, so I'm just applying glue to the next piece. And generally what you would do is let them dry in between gluing on the next piece. So you would have done all the white pieces and then let them sit to dry before gluing them onto the brown piece, just so that they don't slide around when you're aligning them. And again, like I said, if you get a little bit of glue on there, just rub it off before it dries. Okay. So now we're going to glue the brown onto our first of the fancy papers. And when working with the large sheets of paper, they tend to be lighter in weight than using the cardstocks. So you just need to experiment with how much glue. Some of them take very little, and some of them actually need a lot because the texture is more rough and it's harder to absorb the glue. This one seems to be working quite nicely. And then finally, we're going to glue on the backing. And with the backing, you want to glue the pretty side on the outside so that that's what they see. And then what they'll see from the front is just another plain brown border. So again, applying the glue to the smaller of the two pieces. And then positioning it onto the backing. Pushing down gently so as not to have them sliding all over the place, and pushing down gently to adhere the layers together. And then again, you can gently wiggle the paper around to align it to be perfectly aligned. And there you have the invitation, and it has a really nice backing.